I'm going to tell you a true story from the summer of 2021. This was a news story about a little town in Florida. This town in Florida accidentally sold their water tower to a local business person, and that was unintentional. So this was the water tower that was part of the system that actively supplied water to the residents of this town. So what happened is this businessman, he wants to buy this old city building. The city had an old building that they were trying to get rid of. He was going to buy it, turn it into a gym. And so he goes to the city, he buys the building. City gives him, he gives the city money. The city gives him a deed. And he later discovers that the parcel that was conveyed to him in the deed from the city, not only did it include the building that he wanted to turn into the gym, but it also included the active giant water tower that was next to the building. So thankfully, this business person was a good man, and he graciously returned the parcel to the city. He said, "Hey, everybody needs to have their water. I understand this was a mistake." I don't know this business person, but he was a good human being. He didn't have to do that, but he was gracious enough to do that, or this could have been a really big mess for the city and the residents of the city. So he graciously returned the parcel. But that's a pretty big deal, right? That's a big mistake. So this story raises two important questions. Number one, how did this happen? Right? How does the city accidentally sell its water tower? And two, what does this story teach us about commercial real estate and infrastructure, municipal infrastructure? People on these videos that we put up on our channel here on YouTube, I talk a lot about why it's so important to get a survey. Get a survey before you sell. Get a survey. Get a survey before you buy. Get a survey. Get a survey before you build. I kind of sound like a broken record. But these types of stories, and they don't always make the news. This one happened to make the news. But these types of stories are why. They're why I always tell people you need to get a good boundary survey. So how did this happen? How did this little city in Florida get rid of its, accidentally sell its water tower? Well, the first reason is why it happened is the city just didn't understand what they owned. So they didn't know how the parcel in the deed related to what was actually on the ground, right? And of course, you do that with a good survey, right? You get a good survey, then this deed represents this shape on the ground, and here's how this shape relates to the building and the water tower. So they didn't understand what they owned. They didn't understand how the deed that was in their file cabinet related to the physical infrastructure that the city owned. The second reason this happened is the city and the business person didn't get a survey before they bought, right? And you can blame both parties there. There's equal blame, right? The city should have got a survey before they sold, and the business person should have got a survey before he bought. Okay? And neither one of them did that. And so then they ended up in this situation. Who knows how much time and money was spent on this transaction. I don't know if the real estate agents kept their commissions there was time and money spent here, right? And all this could have been avoided with the survey before the purchase. And so one of the other reasons this happened, and this is pretty typical across the United States, is local governments' land ownership records are notoriously bad, right? So most local governments, and this applies also to state governments and the federal government, they don't know what they own. They just do a really they do a really bad job of keeping track of what they own. Now, there's a good reason for that, and the reason that we see that problem in the government that we don't see in the private sector is because most government parcels are not taxed, right? So on the private side, we do still occasionally run into issues where ownership of land is unclear, but it's much more rare because somebody's paying taxes, and the tax assessor wants to know who to send the tax bill to. So there's a financial incentive there for the tax assessor to track ownership of private property. And we just don't have that incentive on the government side because government parcels aren't taxed as a general rule. Okay, so local land records of local government land records, what the records that track what the government has bought and sold and what they own, notoriously bad records. So that's part of how this happens. And then the other thing that I've learned as I've gotten older and spent more time in the real estate industry is a lot of smaller local governments, cities, counties, and utility service providers, they don't have the local real estate expertise they need, kind of in the building under the roof, right? And so they've got somebody, trying to do this job, trying to manage real estate for the government agency, and they may not have the technical expertise that they need. And I understand why that happens. They've got a tough job and there's budgets, and they're doing a lot in a lot of situations. They're doing the best they can. I'm sure that was the situation in Florida. And so you have somebody in a local government agency trying to handle real estate transactions, and they haven't had the proper training, or they don't have the technical expertise they need. So that's why things like this happen. So what does it teach us? What can we learn? If you're someone in local government, what can you learn? Or if you're in real estate and you're representing somebody that's going to buy a parcel from a government agency, or is going to you're involved in that transaction as an appraiser or a real estate broker, what can we learn? First of all, good land records are critical, right? Don't just assume that the deed is selling what you think it's going to sell, because that may not be the case. You may think that the deed's selling that old building and it's selling the water tower, right? So if you're not 100% confident in what your deed is going to sell, you need to talk to a land surveyor, okay? Yet it doesn't even necessarily mean you need to get a survey. Chances are a surveyor could have looked at that deed and even without a survey realized that it included the water tower. There's a good chance of that. So talk to a good surveyor, even if you don't get a survey. The other thing it teaches us is that a good survey, a good boundary survey, links the physical assets to a legal parcel, right? So part of the reason we got into this problem in Florida with the water tower is there wasn't a good connection between the physical location of the water tower and the deeded parcel that the city was going to sell, right? That's what a survey does. A survey takes the physical assets on the ground and relates them to a parcel in a deed description. That's the whole point of a boundary survey. Okay, so a good survey could have fixed this problem. And then finally, the last lesson is if you don't have the kind of expertise you need in-house for your real estate transactions, you're going to mess stuff up. You're going to mess stuff up. And every once in a while, you're going to mess stuff up in a really embarrassing and expensive way, right? So don't do that. If you're a local city or a county or a utility provider, get some help. Establish a good working relationship with the local land surveyor. I've got clients that call me on a regular basis and will ask questions, right? We don't send them a bill. They're good. We have a good relationship with those folks, right? When they actually need work, we got to get our boots on the ground and do some work. Then we'll work with them and we'll send them a bill. But oftentimes they'll just call us and say, hey, here's what we're thinking about, or here's what somebody suggested, or this is what we need to do. What do you guys think? Do we need a survey? Do we need a land attorney? Can we do this without a survey? And we'll answer those questions. And if you've got a good surveyor that you have a good working relationship with, she's not going to sell you a survey you don't need. She's going to tell you, you know what, I think in this case, you don't need a survey. If you need a survey, she's going to tell you that. She's going to be honest. She's going to put your needs ahead of her own. And so if you're in local government or a small organization like that, it could even be a private organization. It could be a hospital or a university. And part of your job is to manage land and infrastructure. Make sure you're working with a good land surveyor, good private land planner, if you don't have that expertise in-house, so that you can avoid these types of mistakes.